behalf of Jackson Paul Pharmaceuticals Limited, makers of doxycycline Doxipol DRL 100 mg capsule for the treatment of COVID-19 patient. In the fight against coronavirus, Lycored soft gel provides the required defense to boost the immunity, and NariCal, calcium tablets for today's Nari. Myself, Amit Saxena, along with my teammate, Dr. Deepika Chhabra, welcome you all to attend second episode of series COVID and Stress, an initiative of Indian Academy of Cosmetic Dermatology and Gynecology by Founder President Dr. Ragini Agrawal, National Vice President Foxy. Let's fight together. We welcome the esteemed faculty present with us today, Dr. Chandan Kachru, Dr. Preeti Jindal, and Dr. B.K. Varich. Welcome to all the attendees. Please post your queries by text in Q&A box to be answered at the end. Please note that this webinar is streaming live on Facebook and the recording will remain on Jackson Pearl YouTube channel for reference and promotion. Now I request Dr. Ragini Agrawal to kindly initiate the session.
Thank you, Amit. Very good evening to all of you who has joined today here to share our views for a topic which is very, very burning, that COVID is causing too much of the stress. So this is our second episode. What we have planned, we have divided it into two. One part is a simple stress, any stress in your life, how it affects your whole body. And over and above, when you had some disease like COVID, which is affecting your every sphere of your life, whether it is your business, whether it is your grief of leaving because of the mishaps in the family, or your own disease. And sometimes this is so much that it is very difficult to go. In first episode, we have told you that how stress affects the every single organ of your body. Now in this episode, what I'm going to tell you, a mother who is carrying a baby unnecessary has so too much tension, how it is going to affect the life of her fetus. In a long way, the whole life will be changed for that particular baby. When you become mother, it is a very, very big responsibility on you that you carry on this responsibility fully, because you are going to make or break a complete life of a person whom you are going to give birth. And with me, Dr. Varich, she is a senior psychiatrist from the Fortis Mohali. She is going to tell you about how to cope with the COVID stress. And in this way, the third one we will bring, we are going to again divide into two. One part is taken by someone else who will say that, who will tell you the simple stress, how it is affecting. And I will go and tell how this COVID itself causes a neuropsychiatric disorder. So stay connected. We will come again on the 1st July. So I will start today's deliberation, which is a maternal prenatal stress and how it affects your baby's outcome. With blessings of Mahakal, I'll start my presentation. Being a mother is learning about strengths you didn't know you had, and dealing with fears you never knew existed. All the time when you become pregnant, you really all the time, मेरा baby ठीक होगा कि नहीं होगा, कुछ हो तो नहीं जाएगा. Although these thoughts are very holy, but you don't know that these thoughts causes the changes inside you, and those changes causes an effect on the baby, and the whole life of baby under stress changes like anything. Stress is the trash of modern life. We all generate it. If you don't dispose of it properly, it will pile up and overtake your life. So what I'm going to talk about two things. One is the Baker hypothesis. most of the gynecologists and pediatricians is very, very aware of this hypothesis that in utero atmosphere affects the life of baby in a way that at that time that child contracts the adulthood diseases like early diabetes, dyslipidemia, or metabolic syndrome. And the second thing, which is very important and least talked about, is the effect of maternal stress on the growing fetus. Mother का जो mental status है, it will affect the growing fetus in a long, long way. And it will really reprogram her whole life. And you will not understand why this baby is so much jittery, so much incompetent or fearful. What is behind it? So today's antenatal care has changed. Here we are stressing on mental health. This is as important as anything else. Even I can say it is more important because it is going to affect the generations. Postnatal depression and postnatal blues is a very common term and everybody understands, but people don't understand that antenatal stress is many a time a base for that postnatal depression. Almost 50% of the cases begin prenatally and 30% of the antenatal depression extend into the postpartum period. Stress is a silent disease. Pregnant women need to be educated in recognizing when they have stress, the consequences, and some of the simple things they can do to make a difference. Friends, this stress is a very vital part in the growth of the fetus. When we think about that, whether we have taken our prenatal vitamin or not, we have gone for the test or not, we have done our ultrasound or not, this stress of going for everything is affecting the baby. Live in today. You cannot change anything by stressing. So this is very necessary to understand. That's why I have brought this topic in last 2-3 months in a different forum, because this is the least understanding topic, how the antenatal stress affects the baby. Who you are and what you are like when you are pregnant will affect who that baby is. So women's psychological functioning during pregnancy, their anxiety level, stress, personality, ultimately affects the temperament of their baby. Remember your own Mahabharata and Abhimanyu. So it has proven that whatever mother think, mother talk, mother speak, it will transmit it to the baby. It is this stress hormone is like you are bathing the baby, growing baby inside a chemical which is produced by that stressed mom, and it is going to affect the baby. This plays a fundamental role in the etiology and evolution of the diseases and disorders, both in the early stages of the development and the adult life. Neuropsychiatric disorders such as depression, autism, attention deficit disorders, and schizophrenia have a complex etiology, which is influenced by early experiences that affect the vulnerability of the individual. So you think if you have any marital discord, any jhagda in the family, and you are going to transfer all these things to the baby. During early intrauterine and postnatal life, the developing embryo undergoes complex physiological changes, and even small disturbances can have far-reaching consequences, which can be observed into the adulthood. Among the effects induced by the prenatal stress, we can mention dysregulation of the HPA axis. So this is the most important thing which govern our hormones. And this hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, if it is dysregulated, it can cause many types of problems. Even the disturbance of this endocrinal disruption of this axis is a reason why we have so many PCOS patients today. Alteration of the circadian rhythm, reduction of the hippocampal plasticity, and the capacity of learning and the memory are among others. So this is a study which has been done, and what it was found that high maternal anxiety during mid-pregnancy has been associated with the high anxiety as reported by the 8 and 9 years of the old offspring. And if high level of the anxiety were correlated with the emotional and behavioral problem, and 6 years regardless of the postnatal factors, and more sleep problem at the 18 months. Other literature scan, they all said there are lots of difficult behavior, trouble to adapt to the new context, and the crying in their toddlers. Not only this, if you have a pregnancy-specific anxiety, as I say, doc, whether my baby will be okay, am I going to up to the 9 month, or I'm going to abort? All these pregnancy-specific anxiety are good predictors of more externalizing behavior and difficult temperaments in the 27 months old children. So regarding objective stress, it has been suggested that exposure to a high amount of the prenatal stressful events increase fearfulness even after controlling for the postnatal confounding variable. It was found even there's a racial stress also lead to some type of problem, like it displayed a higher temperamental negativity in Mexican American mothers. So high levels of the maternal anxiety were associated with the increased risk of the hyperactivity and inattention. And it was found that many toddlers, they are too active reported by their mothers who are in too much of the stress. So this stress is a better predictor for the difficulties with the attention, regulation, and externalizing problems in the offspring. Many times you see that one child is very serene, calm, and another sibling is very, very naughty, or you can say destructive. Maybe if we, after reading these things, if we go and evaluate, we come to the conclusion that the status of the mother was not so calm and serene when she produced a second sibling instead of the first sibling. So if you see this slide, what happened when there's even the paternal preconception stress can change the epigenetics of the sperms. And lifetime maternal stress, even her early childhood trauma, that is also play a factor. So genetic risks into elevated pro-inflammatory cytokinins because of this stress, elevated glucocorticoids, altered maternal microbiome, all leads to placental dysfunction, changes to the fetal brain, epigenetic changes, adverse programming of the HPA axis. And all these need to the parent-child interaction of certain complication. There might be a premorbid risk factors or increased risk of the schizophrenia spectrum also. So all these physiological, physical, and social stress, along with the hereditary information, that is your genes. So genetic disposition is not only one thing, it is one of the things. And environmental influences, this all along with the prenatal stress, put a pressure on a fetus in uterus and lead to its behavioral changes, congenitive changes, HPA axis changes, and autonomous nervous system changes lead to the stress response and adaptive or maladaptive babies. So it is important impact on the neurobehavioral outcomes of a birth, and it was found that the glucocorticoid is a main culprit or main mediator for this neurodevelopment outcomes. So genetic landscape of the offspring interacts with the prenatal stress to impact the epigenetic alterations associated with the intrauterine environmental exposure. Number of prenatal experiences are associated with the adverse outcome ranging from the cardiovascular problem to the psychiatric diseases in the baby. And it can be manifest as a behavioral rebel, for example, increased fearfulness, or as a physiological one, where there is a brain structure and the function changes occur. Now, what is the mechanism? It has a lasting effect, preventing the long-term negative outcomes. Elevated glucocorticoid signaling is a main key mediators. And sometimes there's a deficiency in the barrier enzyme, which is fetal glucocorticoid exposure, arise in association with the maternal stress, malnutrition, and diseases, and inhibited by the consumption of licorice, that is stimulating. So when pregnant women experience stress, what one thing is found, there's some hormone called corticotropin releasing hormone, which is produced by the placenta, which regulates the duration of the pregnancy and the fetal maturation. So it is called placental clock. It is measured in the mother's blood early in pregnancy between 16 to 20 weeks. And what is the result? If the CRH is high, it's a person likely to deliver prematurely, and those with the lowest level are apt to deliver past their due dates. This high maternal cortisol in pregnancy also affect the baby in a way that child can have a high blood pressure, behavioral disorders, and the altered brain structure. So just to make it more clear, either physical stimuli, mental stimuli, or behavioral stimuli, they are called a stressor. They put a stress on the brain. There's a stress perception in the brain leads to the immune system, endocrine system, and the nervous system. All three super systems react to it and causes changes. That might be severe, moderate, or mild. Psychosocial stressor like your personal life, job status, housing, domestic violence, they all affect your and lead to a adaptive coping behavior on the part of the affected individual. What is happening today in the COVID? So why it is so important to understand the stress changes, and especially for our pregnant patient during this COVID pandemic time, to try to keep them relaxed and as much as possible lower down their stress. And the pregnancy is specific, like anxiety, refer to only related to the pregnancy, such as concern of the outcome of the prenatal screening, fears about the health, development of the uncertainty. These all affect your baby. So this prenatal stress either indirect effect as the maternal health, adverse perinatal outcome, or alter fetal development. Direct or indirect effect lead to compromised postnatal care. If mother is not happy, she's not going to put lots of time for the postnatal time. There might be developmental changes, or there's a psychological dysregulation, and all these things affect the baby. So this maternal stress, it causes an inflammatory response also during pregnancy, and sufficient magnitude, they could have a potential to modulate other aspects of the maternal health and the fetal development. What happens if you see this slide in the healthy pregnancy, there's a reduced CRH in the cortisol, blunted HPA access to the stress response. But when there's a stress, these mothers are more susceptible to infection and illness during pregnancy as a result of the suppressive effects of the stress on the ability of the immune system, which is already depressed. Now, almost 8 to 13% women have this problem. Not only this, it can lead to the restricted fetal growth and the preterm birth. Immediate perinatal effect, if you see that perinatal mood disorders are more common in women who report high level of the life events, and this leads to a postnatal, poorer postnatal care, including the breastfeeding also, and impaired mother-infant interactions. And all these associated prenatal stress can lead to preterm labor, preterm delivery, low infant birth weight, shortened gestation length, preeclampsia, and the gestational diabetes. Not only this, few inventors has found that stress act as a teratogens. That major stress can increase risk of a woman delivering infant with a conotruncal heart defects, neural tube defects, isolated cleft lip. One found that earthquake trauma has a negative effect on the shortening the gestational length. Long-term effect is one is PTB and another is LBW. We all know that the preterm birth and low birth weight can have their own lasting deficiencies in the baby. and they are more likely to have asthma, allergies, severe health condition requiring ongoing medical treatment. So 70% of the infant perinatal deaths are related to LBW and PTB and restricted fetal growth, and who survive are at greater risk of the physical and developmental delays in the later year. It stimulates activity of the maternal endocrine and immune system also, and this also affects the, again in the way of the preterm birth and the low birth weight babies. There can be elevated levels of the inflammatory cytokines compared with the women who deliver normally, and lymphocyte of the women delivering preterm produce more inflammatory cytokines in the culture. Now, psychosocial stress and the pregnancy-specific distress are associated with the elevated IL-6. Everybody knows today IL-6. What is IL-6? So your stress itself per se can increase your IL-6 in your body. So what happened in the COVID time with the stress and with the COVID, you will more susceptible to have a cytokine storm. Women who encounter psychosocial, they have a higher level of CRH also. And this stress and SPA axis activation implicated the development of the other complication like preeclampsia and more of the gestational diabetes also. Other lifespan effect, if we see that these babies have attachment difficulties, stress hyperresponsiveness, asthma, allergy, difficult temperament, and affective disorders. Their cognitive performance in the 5.5 years was impaired. So even in the schizophrenic baby, they have found there is a mothers who have more of the storm during their pregnancy. So exposure of the developing of the fetus to stress hormone altered their neurobiological development and responsible for these type of the changes. What happened? These prenatal stress release the glucocorticoids which enter in the fetal circulation, get access to the developing nerves. Neurons in the developing hippocampus express high number of the glucocorticoid receptor, and the congenital memory impairments observed in the offspring of the straight pregnancy. So there's a whole chain of the event. This is, you think you are stressed. How it is going to affect baby? Your body is start working. Your every stress will be transmitted to your baby. So you have to think to remain calm all the time and think about the only baby, the good things that will be transferred. I think these things are talked by all our spiritual guru. खुश रहिए, अच्छा सोचिए, आप अच्छा बच्चे को transfer करेंगे, and you know the science has proved it. So they are also right. Here it is also right. Our calm is to decrease our stress level. Poor immune function those babies has and more likely to contract the childhood illnesses. Racial, I have told you already. So concept of stress is multifaceted, and individual experience of the stress during pregnancy are influenced by not only by the stressors themselves as described above, but also by the cultural, social, and the environmental context in which the stressors occur. So in the future, we have to think about what type and the degree of the prenatal stress have an effect, what are the gestational ages of the vulnerability, what are the ranges of effects on the child, how does prenatal stress interact with the genetic vulnerability, how are the effects of the prenatal stress moderated by the postnatal care, how do outcomes vary with the different ethnic groups and in the different parts of the world. So more research is required to probe in this mechanism how prenatal stress affect the pregnancy outcome and the offspring development. To conclude, psychosocial, cultural, and the environmental stress experienced during gestation can be detrimental to pregnancy and maternal and fetal health. And recent studies suggest that the prenatal stress can have consequences that span generations. So management of the stress should be an integral part of our care of the pregnant woman. Ideally, it should start preconceptionally only. Thank you so much for your patient hearing. Smile, breathe, and go slowly should be the mantra of your life. Thank you so much. So with this, we will come to the second part of our program. Please show the slide of Dr. B.K. Varich. Madam is a renowned psychiatrist from the Mohali. She works in the Fortis Mohali, and she's going to give you a detailed psychoanalysis and psychiatric perspective for the COVID stress in this pandemic time. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, Dr. Varich. Over to you.
So, just talking about building more resilience in today's world and the impact of mental health in COVID times. I think a lot has been said about mental health recently, but still there are many myths and misconceptions, and people still tend to equate mild anxiety with moderate or clinical anxiety and depression, and they do not know when to actually take help for it. So just coming to COVID-19, how it has contributed or increased the mental health problems. As we all know, COVID-19 has led to a lot of social isolation. People have been in their homes for a long time. Many of them come and discuss with us how they have not stepped out of their houses for months together, and not only elderly people, but even young people and children are not going to school. So it has been quite isolating for many people. There has been, because of this isolation, at times increased screen time for many children. They have, spent more time on screen, and learning from screen can be far more difficult than learning from teachers in person. So that has also had a significant impact. Children complain of headaches, their eyes get tired looking at the screen continuously, and even people working from home from computers, many teachers have found it difficult to adapt to this new interaction through the screen. Of course, we are doing the same interaction today, but then we usually still do it for a shorter time. And then, of course, anxiety about health has really increased. And many people have come and discussed how they have felt breathlessness, chest tightness, pain in their chest. Today only there was an elderly man who, has been having breathing problems ever since the COVID began. And even though he improved for some time with some SSRIs and medication for many months, but when he stopped it again, the same thing has come back. So many people have reported anxiety. Some of them had some symptoms which seem like very similar to the symptoms of COVID, breathlessness and chest tightness, even though they do not have COVID. And sometimes even when people get COVID, they complain of these symptoms in the first 6 days, even though they may have mild symptoms. And sometimes even after recovering from a mild illness of COVID, they continue to have complaints of anxiety, chest tightness, breathlessness, even though they have had a mild COVID illness. Then, of course, there have been other reports, and people have come and talked about domestic violence because of increased number of people being locked at home, working from home. At times, there has been increased substance abuse also, because some people have come and reported how going out to work helped them to actually drink less, whereas when they're staying at home, they have actually, started drinking and using other substances more. So this is another factor. And substance abuse, we all know, does lead to more mental health problems. Then there has been so much financial and job uncertainty for many people, and many people have lost their jobs. They have, we can just see it. I remember last year we had these migrant workers, rickshawalas and auto rickshawalas, and they were waiting to go back home, and they have not still, most of them have not come back. So, and you can see far fewer rickshaws, auto rickshaws on the road, or even Uber, because people are traveling less. So those, I mean, and then of course the hospitality industry, and there's so many people who have, gone back from their cities to their smaller towns and to their parents because they have lost their jobs. So sometimes we may not realize this impact unless we actually know such people, but the impact has been quite huge and quite enormous. Then, of course, all this in turn leads to stress on relationships. So the anxiety, the loss of jobs, staying at home, women having to spend more time with their children, helping them to sit online for their classes, and then also at times looking after the husband who's at home and the other family members. So that has also increased the burden on women in a lot of ways. They may not take out time for themselves, and that has put, more stress on their relationships. So while some people have coped well with COVID, they have increased family time, but others have not been able to do that. And they have, a lot of women have increased workload, in fact. So all these lead to mental health issues like, stress is just a normal reaction to any kind of change in our environment. But other mental health issues can be clinical anxiety and depression, where it is a clinical diagnosis. Insomnia is reported quite commonly. There may be denial, anger, fear after losing someone to COVID, and there may be prolonged grief because people have been unable to grieve over people they have lost. They may have not have been able to spend the last moments together. They may not have been able to grieve over their bodies because of the various anxieties associated with the spread of COVID. So all this has been, quite huge, and I think it's only in the future that we will know the true impact of, even among healthcare workers. I would say nurses greatly, because a lot of young nurses are the ones who are caring for COVID patients in wards, and they are not that well equipped to deal with the stress. Yesterday I was just seeing this woman gasping for breath, a 37-year-old, and she was telling the nurses that, aapke bacche nahi hai, aap mera ek beta hai, mujhe bacha lo. And the nurse standing next to her knew that this woman is going to be on the ventilator soon, and we don't know whether we'll be able to save her. And some of the nurses have reported, that they feel quite unhappy and miserable at the end of the day when they're trying to look after a young patient, and then finally the patient collapses. So it's going to lead to a big mental health impact perhaps on them. And that's why maybe all of us doctors need to be there for them and keep talking to them. So I had just written down a few cases that, one woman working from home has to ensure online classes, attend to her work, then deal with the husband. And then she talks to her husband who is not cooperating with her. By the end of the day, she's overworked, she's overwhelmed, she's irritable, she may shout at the children. So she's undergoing a lot of stress. Then is another 16-year-old who's constantly stuck at home. She's no longer able to meet her friends. She spends a lot of time on her laptop, sleeps late at night, attends classes, falls back to sleep. She is unable to keep up with her work, and has stopped interacting at home too. Now, in contrast, there is a 65-year-old man who would play cards daily and walk with friends, but now has to stay at home. So he has tried and started doing Sudoku puzzles daily. He spent 2-3 weeks on learning how to do Sudoku, and now he does them regularly. He's also learned how to do video calls. He started helping his wife with cleaning dishes and stands with her while she's cooking, and then they play a game of rummy. So, this person has adapted well. So what is the difference? What makes these people different. Partly, of course, it could be your personality. It could be, children who are brought up in a way that they were given responsibilities at a young age, and also their opinions are heard. They're given importance in the house. Maybe those children may be better able to adapt. But it may be just your brain's ability to adapt to situations. So it may be a biological capacity that some people's brains have to adapt better. And can we increase that brain's adaptability? So over here is a brain which is not under stress. Here the blue part is the prefrontal cortex, which is exerting a feedback control over your amygdala and over your locus coeruleus. So the amygdala is the part of the brain which is the emotional brain. Here the prefrontal cortex, which is our rational brain, is controlling that part of the brain. So every time the amygdala starts to get too anxious, it gives it a feedback that, okay, just take it easy and relax. Now, under chronic stress, this can change. And what can happen is that the prefrontal cortex may lose the control over the amygdala. The amygdala may have increased activity. And this can lead to it sending an alarm, or it can lead to the amygdala and the limbic system sending a signal to your adrenal glands. There's increased release of catecholamines, and this can lead to anxiety symptoms, panic attacks. So having a stronger prefrontal network can protect against this negative effect of chronic stress. How do we do this? So again, chronic stress can lead to many different factors: obesity, alcohol and drugs craving, and anxiety and depression. And this is mediated through many proteins and chemicals within the body. One of them is ghrelin. And like this, there are many other chemicals that, lead to this. So high levels of stress can cause, headaches, pains and aches, stomach upset, lump in throat, lack of appetite, tight muscles, skin rashes, even loss of hair, and a number of other, there can be decreased immunity as well. People feel uncomfortable. They can be lack of focus. People will get irritable, restless. There may be poor sleep quality. They may feel sad or guilty, feel very tired. They may start crying for no reason. There may be various thoughts of bad things that may happen in the future. Now, it's important to recognize anxiety and depression early. Many people tend to ignore symptoms. They may have headaches and other somatic symptoms for which they take other treatments. They'll go to a gastroenterologist or they'll go to a neurologist. And often the neurologist or gastroenterologist will eventually write an SSRI for them, which may help them. Many people may try and hide the symptoms due to stigma. They may not seek treatment thinking medicines can be habit forming. And many of them just may not have the knowledge of what to do or where to go. So there are many myths and misconceptions about medicines, and in fact, just like the other day, Ramdev has commented on allopathic medicine. So we were just telling some of the doctors that, at times, many doctors also tend to comment that be careful, don't take antidepressants or psychiatric medications. And sometimes that may be because of myths and misconceptions, because I think it's better to tell the patients that consult with your doctor, with your psychiatrist, or maybe get a second opinion, because if they have given you this, there must be some reason. So we should usually do that because, contrary to opinion, most antidepressants and antipsychotics are not very harmful. They may have a few mild side effects, but usually the side effects are not excessive, or they don't cause drowsiness or other things like people commonly believe. So now, how does a person deal with mild or normal anxiety? So normal anxiety is something that we all face. We can face it before exams, before an interview, before a public debate, or before public speaking. Even some people can have social anxiety before meeting someone who they feel they have not met before. So a very useful technique that maybe we should be teaching children is deep abdominal breathing. And along with that, mindfulness. So a lot of schools abroad are teaching mindfulness early to children. So deep abdominal breathing is just a very simple technique, which is in fact commonly taught during antenatal exercises. During antenatal exercises, people are taught deep breathing. They are taught how to slow down their breathing. They're taught how to take a deep breath from their stomach and their abdomen. And even in COVID, of course, we teach people how to take deep breaths because that is what is helpful. When you take a deep breath with your abdomen, or diaphragmatic breathing as we call it, it actually activates your parasympathetic nervous system. And that slows down the heart rate. It can decrease your blood pressure. So it is a well-known fact that even in allopathy, studies have been done to see that deep breathing like Anulom Vilom, Brahmari, and Om chanting are beneficial in reducing blood pressure. So there have been studies that have been done if it is done properly. Of course, we cannot watch TV and learn this. We should learn it properly from someone. So mindfulness is another very simple technique where a person focuses on their body and their normal breathing. So it's also called Anapan meditation, which is taught in Vipassana by Goenka ji. Vipassana, of course, is a little difficult because it's a 10-day course and people have to go and stay there for 10 days. But it is highly useful for many people with anxiety, where the anxiety is mild to moderate. There it can be quite beneficial. So it teaches you to focus on your breathing and to be in the moment. And every time your thoughts get distracted to something else, again you bring your thoughts back to your breathing. So it's a very useful technique. Square breathing is again a very simple technique where people are taught to breathe in, count to 5. Then they hold their breath for a count of 5. Then they breathe out for a count of 5 and again hold for a count of 5. So it's just a very simple technique, but because you're breathing in counting 5, then you're holding counting 5, then you're breathing out counting 5 and again holding counting 5. So you're focusing on the breathing and you're focusing on the counting. So it's a form of deep breathing plus you're distracting yourself by focusing on the breathing. So meditation, of course, again, has been seen to be quite helpful. It's been seen that it can change our brain structure. Our brain is quite plastic and it's like a muscle. Like when we go to the gym and we exercise, we build up our muscles. So similarly, when we do meditation, it does build up our brain's ability to deal with stress. It actually can change your brain in many ways. It strengthens your prefrontal cortex and it makes your prefrontal cortex stronger. It actually creates new neurons and new synaptic connections between the neurons in the brain. So meditation is a technique that is useful. I mean, there are several brain areas which have been associated in changes brought about by meditation. Like, for example, the insula, which monitors our bodily sensations, the amygdala, which is our fear brain or the fear center, and the prefrontal cortex, which includes the dorsolateral and the medial prefrontal cortex. So these, there are changes in the brain, and meditation done regularly can be highly useful. Again, it should not be done in excess. And in fact, in bipolar disorder and certain disorders, meditation is not recommended, as sensory deprivation can lead to psychotic episodes. So excessive meditation or vipassana, where you are kept away from other people for a period of 10 days, causes sensory deprivation, and that can cause psychotic phenomenon in those who are prone to it. So while some people are naturally optimistic, like some people are naturally thin, others may have to work at it. So I think these are things that we should be discussing in schools and in young people, because it's alarming. The mental health of young people, they say now that, 1 in every 3 young people may actually suffer from a clinical anxiety or depression sometime in their life. So, teaching them how to build up their brain's resilience, teaching them how to identify and change their maladaptive thoughts is something that needs to be worked on. A lot of people complain of negative thoughts. So negative thoughts are thoughts that many of us have. I mean, just like we have positive thoughts in the day, we may have negative thoughts. So becoming aware of your negative thoughts is very important. And how do we do that? If we feel low, anxious, angry, or guilty, try and catch those thoughts and try and keep a thought diary. Then we can work on identifying and changing these negative thoughts. Because if we are having excessive number of negative thoughts in a day as compared to the number of positive thoughts in a day, then that can lead to irritability, low mood, and anxiety, anger, aggression, etc. So learning to change these can be highly useful. These are called automatic negative thoughts, and cognitive behavior therapy helps us to change these thoughts. Cognitive behavior therapy is a weekly therapy which lasts for 2 to 3 months, and people are taught to identify and modify dysfunctional thoughts. They are taught to ask, what is another way of looking at this? What would I say to a friend in a similar situation? What is the worst that can happen? And if it does, so what? So CBT is a very useful form of therapy. It can actually reduce anxiety and depression, and it can reduce relapses. So that's important, and people should follow up in CBT regularly. Then, of course, being kind to yourself. Many people are very harsh with themselves. They may tell themselves, when you ask young people that, in a day, how many times do you have this thought that, oh, I'm so stupid, I make mistakes all the time. So a lot of them will tell you that, yes, I have this thought many times in a day. So we then teach them how to identify those thoughts and to change the thought and be kinder to them, to yourself. Because if you're kind to yourself, if you tell yourself that, no, I did a good job today, I did well by doing this today, despite it being, I was tired or I had a busy day, but I still did all this. If you're kinder to yourself, you'll be happier, you'll have more energy, and you'll be kinder to others as well. So we need to teach young children and adults to be kinder and happier to themselves. As we all know, the spring is followed by summer, summer by autumn, and then the winter comes. So people have lived through the plague. The plague apparently killed, 50 to 60% of Europe's population in the Middle Ages. And we've lived through partition, wars. So change is constant. So it's important to remember to do what you can and leave the rest to nature. And that can happen only if you're positive with yourself and you appreciate your own self, that, I'm doing what I can. And that's what is important. Sorry about that. So stress inoculation. What is stress inoculation? I'll just quickly finish now. Some stress in early life can make us more resilient to later life stressors. So resilience is the ability to focus on solving the problem rather than on just the problem. So we have to focus on the solutions and not the problems. It's also the ability to understand that ups and downs are part of the same, circle. It's also having good coping mantras. So people who have good coping mantras, they tend to do well and face stress better. Exercise, physical exercise is very important. Again, not only does it help in building up your muscles, it also builds up new nerve cells and new neurons in your brain. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, is released, and that increases synaptic connections and it promotes resilience. So it's really important for young people to start exercising regularly. Again, I think these COVID times have been tough, but I think we can ask what can we learn from these times, and maybe it's making us more resilient. Some people, if they keep a gratitude diary on a daily basis, this can be a very good way of cultivating some positivity and gratitude, where we just express some gratitude that I'm thankful for being healthy, I'm thankful for the food I have, and I appreciate that I have a good family, and I appreciate that I have this earth to live on. People who have a routine do much better. I mean, if you remember the grandfather who would wake up exactly at a particular time and go for a walk, start his car at a particular time and clean it. So it's really important that people have a routine, and the ones who do usually do much better because they know what they're doing at the next moment, and that keeps them busy. So a lot of women are busy in household tasks, and similarly, men need to also build up that. A lot of women these days may not be doing as much because of mechanization and less work in the house. But I think it's really important to have some regular hobbies or some regular exercise and a routine. I've already spoken about this. Be kind. I think you can be kind to others if you're kind to yourself. And if you help out someone else, that is a big way of feeling good. You know, you teach a person, you help out someone, or you are nice and kind to your maid, or you speak nicely to the dhobi wala or the sabzi wala, smile at them and speak nicely to them, and it can really help. So recognize depression early. I think that's really important. Just like we don't ignore fever, don't ignore high levels of stress. Recognize it early. Avoid speculation and rumors. Look after your physical and mental health and commit to daily exercise. Have a buddy you can call. You know, it's been seen that people who have good social connections, they live much longer. There's a study of 73 years where they have seen that the one factor that helps people to age better and live better, happier lives is people who have better relationships and social connections. So, learning how to take it one day at a time, I think these are just good mantras that we should have for ourselves. That take it one day at a time, and each day is a day with new possibilities. And I have faith in myself no matter what. So, have a mantra for yourself. You know, I have these 2, 3 mantras for myself which really help me. And have a plan for stress and anxiety. When you're having stress or anxiety, do some deep breathing, walk and count your 30 steps, go and have some water, go and make yourself a cup of tulsi and ginger tea, or recite a prayer. Recognize clinical anxiety and depression, recognize early signs. Women are more prone to depression, whereas men are more prone to substance abuse. Depression and anxiety are common in women, in young girls, and as well in women around the age of 40 and above. That's the age when commonly many women get their first episode of depression. So it's a common problem. Don't get scared by it. Just recognize it and get treatment for it. Uh, so what is clinical is if you have more than 2 weeks of continuous sadness, continuous anxiety, persistent lack of motivation or interest, disturbed sleep, disturbed appetite, decreased social interaction, any significant other change in behavior, then this can be a clinical anxiety or depression, and one should get some help for it. In the future, apps are being developed which can monitor sleep, appetite, activity levels, changes in voice and volume, psychomotor activity, and these will give a warning to the person that you should go see a doctor. And this can really help, because currently depression is really responsible for absenteeism. It's also the leading cause of disability as measured by years lived with disability. And it's now, second place in disability associated. So I think these are things that we need to keep in mind. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Simi. Dr. Kaur. It is such an interesting way you have explained everything, and really we have to understand. I will hand over to the moderator to take over the complete session and give all the sum ups and take the discussion forward. We have with us Dr. Chandan, who is a consultant OB/GYN and adolescent health specialist, W. Pratiksha Hospital, and Dr. Preeti Jindal, a renowned IVF specialist and a cosmetic gynecologist from Mohali and President Mohali Obs-Gynae Society. Over to you, Preeti and Chandan.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for nice introduction. And I was really mesmerized by Dr. Varich's
thank you, Preeti, for introducing Dr. Varich.
Yes, indeed. I was about to tell Dr. Preeti, it's wonderful to meet such a orator, and you have made such a wonderful presentation, ma'am. Especially the resilience part, which is actually the utilization of our whatever we are taught today. So how to manage it, that is what you have told us. Now we will be discussing case scenarios, and Dr. Varich, you will help us in whenever we need your help, for telling us what should we do. So to start with, my dear friend Dr. Preeti, I welcome you and for this discussion part. And would you like to sum up the sessions which already have been discussed?
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and it's a pleasure. And of course, Dr. Varich is a very close friend and such a wonderful orator she is. And I'm actually really surprised by both the talks. I never actually expected there's so much of content in the psychological aspect. Even ma'am, Dr. Ragini ma'am covered it so well, so many aspects. And Dr. Varich added the icing on the cake. Thank you to both of you. And we learned so many new things. Just to summarize that, there is a lot of physiological as well as lots of pathological changes which are going place, which lead to psychological changes. When we are thinking about the mental health of a person at any time, whether it is the COVID time, tough times like this, or in normally, we normally think that psychological thing is very simple, anxiety, depression, and blah, blah, and that's it. But there is so much to it, is something which was so wonderfully summarized. So thank you so much. So over to Dr. Chandan to start this session.
Thank you so much. So to start with it, I will take this further. We have already discussed this COVID stress part 1 in our previous discussion. Dr. Preeti, do you agree with me that as the coronavirus pandemic rapidly sweeps across the world, it is inducing a considerable degree of fear, worry, and concern in the population at large, and among certain groups in particular, such as older adults, care providers, and people with underlying health conditions?
Yes, absolutely, Dr. Chandan. And as it has extended for such a long time, we have seen the varied reactions. Initially, it was fear. Then came the time last year, somewhere between May and June, when the cases were very less. They were not that bad. Everybody was in lockdown. And then came a time of celebration also, which was a little odd. But then, as Dr. Simi will agree with me, Dr. Simi is your nickname, so I'll call you that. But then Dr. Varich will agree to it that there was a time when every household, they were finding new happiness in the lockdown. But then as the pandemic crossed over to October, November, and then carried on this year, now a great fear, frustration, anxiety is setting in. So we are seeing all spectrums of mental changes during this COVID time. Yes, definitely. Yes.
So we have seen that I am sure not even one person in the whole world globally has not been affected by, I cannot find out, one person who has not been affected by this pandemic. Especially in the high risk groups, we have old age people, We have, if I talk about my family, I mean, I am not able to sit with my mother-in-law who's very old for much time, because I always fear that maybe I give infection to her, as a healthcare provider. So that age group becomes very vulnerable, people with comorbidities, because every time we are talking about COVID, comorbid वालों को ज़्यादा परेशानी हो जाएगी. So they are always in that fear of getting it and then landing in trouble. People with mental disorders already, they are very vulnerable group. They are not getting proper treatment. They are not able to reach the hospitals. The hospitals have become COVID, and non-COVID, people are really suffering, and anxiety levels are very, very high. So as a healthcare worker, Dr. Preeti, how do you deal? I mean, what have you experienced it as a healthcare worker, the stress factors?
Yes, there are many levels of stress when you are working as a healthcare. One is the stress to protect yourself. Second stress is to protect your near and dears. Third stress is to protect your own staff. And then comes a bigger stress to protect your patients. Along with the protection part, there again comes so many things like when the COVID pandemic started, then initially there was a problem in which I believe in most of the hospitals, everybody was so anxious, even the doctors and the health workers. So it was very difficult to keep the team together. Many people were thinking, no, we do not want to work. Many of the staff, the nurses, even doctors, colleagues, many just said, no, it is fine. We are ready to sit at home for 1 or 2 months, but we are not coming. Yes. So having your team together was the first step. Second was your own anxiety. You had a fear of unknown. It was an unseen enemy.
And still there. It is still an unseen enemy. Every day we get to know new things. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. But now I think we are becoming little resilient.
Resilient, yes. That is what I wanted to tell you, that Madam has discussed just now, resilience. Once you face a calamity, you become little, with time you become more resilient.
Yes. And then also came the anxiety. I remember in the initial phase when I was going home after doing my clinics and all, we would not enter the house. We'll change our attire outside in one room. We'll keep our footwear outside. Now, of course, we're not doing all these things. Then we will just go inside, wash our face. Initially, I would also take a shower before entering the main household. And this also used to have so much of stress, because if you have to go in the emergency, how many times you can take a shower, how many times you can change the clothes, and then you put those clothes in the bleach and then you take it out. I mean, it was so difficult time, but now at least that part is gone.
Yes,
but that thing took a lot of stress.
Yes.
And third, which I actually felt for the patients, I got several patients who were just not taken care of because they were having COVID and they were left to fend for themselves. Not that I blame the health staff, because even the healthcare workers are also human beings. They also don't know what is happening. But then if we keep all that part aside, if we see from the patient point of view also, it was not very easy time. And to deal with a patient who has already been abandoned by one of your colleagues, that also was very stressful, because you have to maintain a fine balance that you are not implicating anyone and you are taking care and tying the loose ends. So these were the few very stressful things which I think I faced.
Besides that, we had that impact of misinformation, overloading of information.
True.
Sometimes this would be the guideline. The next, after 1 week, the guideline will change. Then, the scientific part of it. Then second, the loss of usual self-care activities. So we were used to a particular style of lifestyle, going to the gym, going out to eat, especially this thing. Even our children are missing that, spending time with friends, at least, not much of time, but we used to have this.
Yes.
And being a high-risk provider, having special events cancelled, like there is a special, aajkal sunte hain, that is called as conference missing syndrome.
Yes, absolutely.
You feel like, going out and wearing saris and wearing good clothes, meeting your friends there, seeing new places, with that we used to see new places as well. And anyways, the webinars are keeping us happy, but there was a little bit different sort of, exposure to those meetings. And then talking to kids about COVID-19 has become a big problem. Now,
Yes.
in this second part, we will talk about how do we cope with this. We have discussed much of the problems. Now, what are the coping skills? So we have the biological coping skill, that is, we should be having 7 to 8 hours of sleep each night, like Dr. Barich also explained very nicely. Eating at least 3 healthy meals per day. Exercise, what is happening is we are going to the hospital and then we are in those PPs and all, we are not getting enough time to have the meals as per the time. So we have to take care of that. Exercise 3 days per week for 30 minutes where your heart rate is over the 120 breaths per minute. Then emotional. Expressing yourself and talking with co-workers, like Dr. Simi said, that we should be talking with our friends, validating and supporting others, engaging in self-compassion and self-limits. That's what she explained very nicely, that we should be, talking, having that diary with us and talking about ourselves. What did we do the whole day? And we will definitely come to know a little bit better things in life also. And connecting with those we love each day. Dr. Simi, would you like to add on that? Recognizing when your thinking is being influenced by your emotional state. So you have to recognize that and you have to take care of your emotional state. Then avoid black and white thinking, those bad negative thoughts like she has explained in her lecture, and recognizing our behavior is contributing to negative emotional state. Then environmental, keep a clean and organized environment, identify factors in our environment that are contributing to our stress and eliminate them if possible, and change your environment if feeling too stressed out. Especially I would like to say that news which we watch on the TV should be watched very minimal, and avoid reading the fake news also. Maintaining social distance can be very isolating and difficult situation. This may raise tensions at home, create loneliness, feeling constrained. You may feel more isolated from your co-workers as well due to social distancing rules. So find ways to get outdoors, get out of the house that are still safe. Start a project in your yard, or you can start, the gardening sort of thing. Connect with friends online as others may feel isolated as well, and increase virtual communication with co-workers. Leave them fun digital notes, memes, etc. And creating a new routine, taking initiative to set up routines with co-workers, accepting the idea that some things won't get done, and talking with boss about expectations and priorities. Would you like to add something, Dr. Preeti?
Very nicely put. Just one thing, reward yourself, as said by Dr. Varech also, small rewards. Don't be very harsh on yourself. What you are facing is same thing which other person is facing. These are very tough time, very difficult time. And virtual meetings and all, yes, they do keep us connected, but not as connected as we were socially. So one may feel very lonely, one may feel that one has not done enough for the day and one has not communicated the thoughts. But again, small rewards, enjoy each day. We should remember that in these tough times, staying alive itself is a big accomplishment,
yes,
rather than anything else. So
absolutely.
Just take the day as it comes. Every day the rules are changing. There will be good days, there will be bad days. We know last month was very horrific. It was one of the horrendous times. But then now things are better.
Right.
So there is always a light out behind at the end of the tunnel. So keep on looking for that light, and that really helps you in coming out of it.
Actually, it is very difficult, but we can always try for it.
Yes.
Every day we can just write down what good things we have done. Maybe we have helped somebody to get medicines from somewhere. We have in other ways also, we have made a good dish maybe at home. Yeah, write it down. So you feel better and you go out of that normal rut of COVID every time. Yes. So it's okay to acknowledge your own fears with the patient also. Sometimes we might relate to the जो भी patient हमसे कह रहा है, हो सकता है हमने भी वो situation face की हो. If you talk about it, the tension becomes less for both the parties. And allowing yourself to take a break from talking about it, that is reserving empathy. Empathy actually is very, very important. Not sympathy but empathy for the people. Think that there are many people who are less than me, who are not getting as much as I am getting. You can कहते हैं ना कि अपने से नीचे वालों से अपने को compare करना चाहिए. So that is a very important thing to get good positive vibes. So now for the patient, what all did you face as a doctor for your patients from the patient point of view?
Yes. For the patients, there were again a full plethora of problems they had. First, uncertainty, because a patient always looks at the doctor for the answers, and there were times when we also didn't
have, yes, definitely.
Yes. We would say, okay, let's see what comes. So obviously they had no shoulder to rely on for some time till the things became more clearer. So this was one thing which I felt that where there was a lack, because we were not able to help the patient by giving them a good assurance. But at the same time, patients were okay thinking that, yes, doctors are there, they are looking after us. And even they also know, it was both ways. They got a relief in this thing that even the doctor doesn't know what is happening. So let's wait and watch and see what is happening. Secondly, because we all usually deal with the pregnant patients and gynec cases. So for the non-elective surgical patients, it was okay. But then what of the women who were carrying the babies? There was so much of uncertainty again, that who will deliver them, if they need us, who will look after them, and if they develop COVID, then will they be sent to some new COVID hospital where they will not be able to be seen? That was
absolutely
such a big anxiety.
Yeah. There were so many patients who could not even, be taken by their doctors because they were also not available. And they had to arrange beds. Some doctors were not, working in the COVID hospitals. So they couldn't take the patients. So they were, literally on the road. So what to do next? The patients were very worried.
Very worried.
Yes,
and
yes.
Secondly, I would not actually, and it's not only the doctors didn't want to take, and it is their right also. I totally agree that if a doctor doesn't want to take, especially those with comorbidities, with they don't want to see, it is the doctor's human right that he can refuse to see that patient. So it was such a bridge that patients were not able to understand that part, that how any doctor is refusing to see. So again, it became a task because I was seeing the COVID patients. So I had to make them understand the human right of a colleague also. That also was a very big portion of my strength went. And then COVID facility, as you rightly said, you cannot just deliver COVID patient anywhere.
Yes.
Yes. If the hospital is not having the COVID facility, then the poor doctor has nothing to help the patient. Then they will, of course, have to refer the patient.
Yes.
So this was one. And then about the complications. The patients were not very aware, and doctors were also not very aware what will happen. Now, over the time, what I have seen, I'm sure you people must have also seen that after COVID, usually nothing happens. But in few patients, there is excessive placental maturation leading to oligohydramnios. Suddenly, I've seen in 3-4 patients of mine.
Yes.
And the placenta is very bad. So even we didn't know, after 35 weeks, there were times when I was not sure whether to carry on the pregnancy or to just wait, because you cannot lose that baby after 36 weeks. And if waiting will become too much for that, and I may lose that baby. So that was also a lot of uncertainty as an obstetrician we all went through.
Yes. And there is a registry also coming from, American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as the RCOG and ACOG, all the three together, which says that preterm births are very much common in COVID times. Yes, preterm births are very common. So those were one of the complications. And, the patients also had too much knowledge, but too little, that you will agree they still have. And, worries about family. I'll tell you, one patient of mine had to leave to Orissa at 36 weeks of pregnancy, because he said that there are no maids here and nobody is going to take care of my child. So he left in his car, 36 weeks pregnant lady, to Orissa from Gurgaon. Imagine. So that was the worry about how she's going to take care of the family.
And we also had patients, the husbands were stuck up, they were not able to come. Like those in merchant navy.
So there are many clinical scenarios of anxiety, of psychosis, trauma, suicidal thoughts, panic attacks. So normally we do all kinds of things to take care of ourselves, but unfortunately many of these activities involve being around others and have been cancelled. So this is also one of the problems which happened. And now we'll talk about the coping skills. How do we cope? So most of this also has been, dealt with, and we'll just revise it, that get creative. Many of our doctors started painting in the during this COVID times. Many started, making dishes, new types of dishes, doing YouTube exercises, meditation and mindfulness at home. Get a video game that involves exercise. Read those books you have always wanted to read. Go for a walk, talk to the friends online, and connect. Then for the students, did you find a change in the students' activities, Dr. Preeti?
Yeah, my own children, because they were stuck up at home, and then all the time initially there was nothing, but then after 2-3 months when the online classes started, they started missing their friends. They aim to go to the school, meet their friends and sit together. Also, too much of screen time, the headache was something which I really saw. They really used to have headache after some time, and it was only after initially when the school started, there were lots of classes. But then slowly the government guidelines came that you can do only for 3 hours or what. But initially when it started, it was right from morning till the afternoon, like a normal school, and without a break. So that actually had a problem. Then obesity, of course, because the weight gain was there. They were not going outside. They were not playing. Lifestyle disorders, again, to make them get up in the morning and get them ready. The schedule had changed because they didn't have to go to the school. So they would not think about getting up early, taking a shower, changing the clothes. So that part was something which was a little struggleful. As far as other children are concerned, as my patients and my friends told me, yes, addiction and smoking, not actually, I have not come across this. That might be a stress buster for the older ones. Yeah, but then these were the few things, and the eyesight was getting affected. So
there were good points. The only good point was that they were spending more time with their parents.
Yes.
And parents also had an eye on them from the parents' point of view, but not from the children's point of view. So how do we cope with that? Yeah, we were talking about screen time, and now screen time has increased. So what we can do is be aware of your own media consumption. This impacts your mood. So the parents have to become the role models for their children. If you are watching too much of your mobile phone, then you cannot tell your child not to watch. So you have to be a role model for your child. Disengage from the social media as much as possible. Maybe you can have a certain part of time towards the social media. Read beyond the headlines. Don't go to the politics only. Read something about sports and some recreational, that Daily Times part of the newspaper. They take break from the news. This is very, very important, because news is something which gives you so much of, because they have to increase their TRPs, and it increases our negativity also. Do not spread information until it is confirmed. So fake news should not be spread. Then for the parents, as parents, managing the toddlers, managing the teenagers, managing their own work-life balance and lifestyle management became problems. All these became problems. Now, did you find your pregnant patients who had children, how did they manage?
First of all the young mothers were who were second-time mothers, they were very upset because they were not getting even 2 or 3 hours, which is they used to get when the older child used to go to the school.
Yes.
So that was a hassle.
And managing his school on the screen time, on virtually.
Yes, absolutely. And it did have a toll on them. I saw a little bit increase in the IUGRs because they were not able to eat and they did not have the house help also. Rest was not there, and the home help had already gone. So the type of life they would have the way they would have liked to enjoy their second pregnancy, they were not able to do. So yes, that was very difficult. Those who had teenagers, they were also cribbing. In fact, everybody was cribbing at the end of it, because the teenagers, they were not having any schedule and they were not listening. And then their demands were increasing. They want to eat something at very odd times. So all these things, yes, it did have a very big toll on the patients.
So what coping skills we can advise our patients is that being mindful that you can only do the best you can. and accept the idea that you are not going to be a perfect parent right now. This is a difficult time. Try to be, every time we want to have perfection in everything. It is not possible. Our environment is not conducive this time that we would be a perfect parent at this time. We will have some problems because there are problems. There are problems of pandemic, isolation, not able to go out. Children were going out and they were small children that used to play a lot, and now they're not playing. Now you have to play with them. Take it as a positive sign that we were not spending much time with your children. Now we are giving a quality time to our children. Yes. And remember, everyone is managing this with children right now. People will understand that you are not the only one who is suffering this. The whole world has suffered because of this. So those were the coping skills. I will stop here. And yes, Dr. Varich, now we will be we're happy to have your comments on that. We gave you the scenarios of ourselves as healthcare workers, our patients, our parents, and the students, as well as the children. So how do we go about it, increasing their resilience?
No, I think you have, given very good advice, and you've already said what is required. And, these are tough times, and I think we just have to make the best of it. So women women are the caregivers, and I think it's important for them to remember that you can be a caregiver only if you take care of yourself. So when you take care of yourself, it's very important not only to take out time for yourself, agar aapko apne liye time nahi bhi mil raha, just be kind to yourself. Just tell yourself that I am not a superwoman. I can do what
perfection
I can.
Has to go. That perfection has to go. Yeah.
And at times, if you're not able to do it, that's fine. And it's more important to spend that 30 minutes of quality time with the children. As it is, even before the pandemic, we used to say that spend 30 minutes with the children where you're just playing a game, where you're not saying, don't do this, don't do that, don't eat this, don't eat that, or, just be there, play a game with them as a friend.
Dr. Varich, one thing had happened before pandemic कि बच्चों को इन्होंने ना एक रोबोट जैसा बनाया था कि 1 घंटा उसको म्यूजिक क्लास में जाना है, दूसरे घंटे उसको गिटार बजाना है, तीसरे घंटे उसको ये जो होता है ना क्या कराटे क्लास में जाना है, and then there's so many these tuition classes they had to attend. So the child had become a robot. I think that thing has stopped. Is this a nature's way of stopping that? Because we were not able to stop that. It was creating a lot of stress in children. Children were too much stressed with this.
Yeah. I think, teenagers especially will be what they are. They have mood swings. They will get irritable. In fact, someone was telling me the other day that even in that time when we used to live in caves, even then, teenagers used to have a different.
Absolutely, because their brain is, that is a abstract. They can't understand that reasoning part of prefrontal cortex is not developed.
So someone said that actually helps the species because they would wake up late or sleep late, and they would actually spot a danger when the rest of the species was sleeping. Or something like
absolutely, because their neurons get activated at that time. They say that they do better in the class in the afternoon rather than in the morning. There's come in the research as well. They do well at about 12 o'clock. इसलिए तो सब exams 12 बजे के बाद होते हैं. And but बेचारे बड़े confused हैं because of the exams. Also, they're getting postponed. They are changing the method of getting them passed and all, and so many things. But they are accepting it. That you should accept. That we should appreciate. That they are becoming resilient. This pandemic is going to have a very good effect of resilience. That I will tell you about myself. That I also, at my one point of time, when I had at one point of time faced so much of bad situation in my life, which made me a very, very strong person. I mean, I can survive any sort of, calamity. So I made it a positivity out of that negativity in my life. That's how I think.
Yeah. So this is what the pandemic has taught us, to become so tolerant, and this also shall pass. That is the main motto which it has taught.
Yes, that should pass. Yes.
Yeah.
So I think we are on time, Dr. Deepika, and we have ended on time. Huh? Thank you so much for patient hearing and giving us time to discuss about our stress. I think we are a little bit de-stressed by discussing at least on this platform and having. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, such a wonderful discussion, and they're not allowing to open my video. Anyway, without video, bye-bye. And thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Come
Thank
again
you so much.
Come again on 1st July. We will have more discussion on the stress and COVID.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Over to you, Dr. Deepika.
Dr. Chandan. Bye-bye.
Thank you from Jagsonpal as well. Jagsonpal brings to you Doxipal DRL, doxycycline 100 mg capsules for the treatment of COVID patients. Also, we have Lycored soft gels. In the fight against coronavirus, Lycored soft gels provide the required defense to boost the immunity. And our newly launched NariCal tablets, which contain calcium citrate malate, vitamin D3, and folic acid. My teammate, Mr. Amit Saxena, joins me, Dr. Deepika, to thank all the esteemed faculty here with us and all the attendees present with us today. Thank you so much for joining in. And we look forward to your presence again this Saturday when we have another session on COVID-19, a panel discussion on preparing for COVID-3, June 5th, 2:30 to 4 p.m. Please note down the webinar ID. Thank you so very much and look forward to see you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.